All right, she's rolling. Good evening, folks. It's July 4th, 2018. We've just went out to our pal Dylan's place, your cottage out here close to Belleville in Ontario, on this wacky island, like at the tip of a peninsula. We just had a kick-ass, I guess, the weekend. Yeah, we were here Monday and Tuesday. I'd call it the weekend. And we had a whole bunch of fun about it. And so now we've decided to, we're all writers, we're all interested in literature and these sorts of things. So we decided we'd get together and rap about it. Rap about our experiences last night. Yeah.
Well, it was a pleasure having you guys down here at my cottage. It was quite spectacular. It was really great to have you guys.
Yeah, it was a groovy time.
Real treat.
It's nice to be up here around nature, water, trees, elements, sun. Blazing hot weekend.
Yeah, yesterday was euphoric. Probably one of the most euphoric days I've experienced, just because of the psychedelics and the nature setting. It's sort of an Eden out here.
Yeah, real sunshine.
It was truly spectacular yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like we went off on this huge adventure. We didn't go very far. We're sort of floating around this peninsula.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the lysergic acid, it felt like we were on some gigantic adventure.
Some epic journey.
Yeah.
And that's what very fulfilling.
And that's what psychedelics are good for. Psychedelics, it puts you into sort of a childlike mindset where your brain, it sort of feels like you're a child again, except with the intelligence of an adult.
Mm-hmm.
And then you experience the world with that sort of oceanic consciousness. And
opens you to new programming.
Yeah. And there's definitely some science to back that up, which we could look into. I couldn't pull it out of my pocket, but it's definitely there.
Yeah.
In terms of the way lysergic acid lights up the brain with all sorts of...
Yeah.
Makes all these new connections and all that.
Yeah, our old connections that were there when you were young.
So I would get,
those got dusted over.
Reconnecting.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so I feel like because of that hyperactivity, you get the connection to the childhood mode while still being in the adult mode.
Mm-hmm.
And then something we've all talked about, that something we've experienced at a few points yesterday, is that not only were we able to access childhood mode, but we were able to access organic memory, I guess, primordial instincts. Of just kind of being able to swim with the currents, and be with the flow, so to speak.
Yeah, the flow of nature.
Yeah, that's definitely something. I've been having this whole little summer trip with you guys and with some other people and with my girlfriends and all that. And one of the big things that came to me recently was that just thinking a lot about the primordial experience and how much of who we are as humans comes out of our bestial origins. So contrary to all the theologists in the world who think that Allah or Yahweh or God created life spontaneously out of thin air, humans, Homo sapiens, are actually the product of millions of years of evolution. We came from primordial animal origins. We come from a very long line of ancestors that can be traced back billions of years into the primordial waters. And all that, in one way or another, my conception is that really has a deep influence on who we are today.
Mm-hmm.
When we jump into the water and swim around, that touches something in our genetic memory. Fishing, sitting around the fire, music, drumming, all of that, it all touches something really deep within us. But also with we're humans, we can think and intellectualize. So we can use psychedelics to get back to these primordial bestial states, these deep pockets of emotion and passion and animal instinct.
And come to terms with them.
Exactly, we can explore it consciously and understand it. And there's a hell of a lot more there, but that's what I've been journaling about and picking up. And what do you guys think about that?
That's
shit?
amazing, man. Like,
That's
I think,
well worded, yeah.
yeah,
Groovy.
I think that there's a lot of like plumbing that has just been forgotten about in the house that is the human being. You know, just these, you know, as time goes on, this old plumbing system of like energy that used to be there has just been mulled over by, you know, technology allowing the ease of us not having to do certain things. And so we've just, a lot of our primary instincts are just being snuffed out by, I guess, the modern idea of civilization.
Our advancements. And
Yeah, or, you
technology.
know, refinement and, you know, keeping those animal instincts and urges harnessed so that you can use them productively and intelligently. But, you know, that has a way of over-restraining the animal in a sort of way so that you kind of ruin the spirit of the thing that's trying to come out of it.
Yeah. It's in the DNA code. All of our relatives we're closest to monkeys, but in a lot of ways you can see how humans act like bacteria.
Yeah,
and
amoebas.
Amoebas, and there's a reptilian aspect to us too, and LSD with its hyperconnectivity in the brain, it really allows an individual to access those at your own will too, because I find LSD just kind of like blows all the doors open and you could just go into any space you want almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially when you put yourself into the elements, like swimming in a lake.
Yeah,
Oh,
that
yeah,
really
it's-
triggered it for
We
sure.
were
sure.
kayaking all day, and just being out there on the water was it was just euphoria that I could not even begin to describe.
And even the mind state of like, we had nothing to do that day. We had no time
Yeah.
time watch, you know what I mean? We purposely had the decision to not think about time. Lord knows whether we even could have at the time.
Yeah, we just saw the sun in the sky and we're
You
like,
got
we gotta use it up before it sinks.
That's why, like,
Yeah, well said.
I felt like a frog in that moment, you know, because, like, what else does an amphibian or any animal have to do but just, like, bounce around in the sun until you regenerate, and then you bounce around in the sun again?
But what'd you call it yesterday? Something frog?
Fish frog.
Yeah. And like by the end of the trip, we're just like, yeah, I think I'm done fish frogging for now. I'm fucking
fish frogged out.
Yeah, fish frogged out. Because when we're peaking, like the real effects of LSD, we were doing something we unconsciously called fish frogging, and we were just able to like access that.
That amphibian consciousness.
Yeah, exactly, and it just like. Yeah, just keep hurling yourself into the water and just
Getting into that, like, just putting yourself into that place. I mean, that's what's beautiful about, like, acid. It's like the magic theater that he talked about in Steppenwolf.
Yeah.
You ever read that book? The main character has this little vial of powder, and he calls it the magic theater. This is
Yeah.
straight out of, like, fucking 1950s. Or no, Herman Hesse would have been, like, 1920s, actually.
Is that like the salt from Dune?
From Dune?
Yeah, if you ever watch Dune, there's like this salt that would give you all the knowledge. All kind of like alluding to DMT, but
Yeah.
but not
But
actually.
that's what I'm getting
coming up
at.
with that,
So
yeah.
the what the character does is, like, you can take a bit of this powder and it puts you in a theater where you can play out scenarios that you want to play out. It's like lucid dreaming. Puts
Yeah.
you into a lucid
Yeah.
dream where you can create any reality in order to experience any reality as anything. And, you know, acid doesn't exactly do that. Like, you know,
No.
even in the highest doses, it doesn't put you into a lucid dream state. But there is something to be said about the capacity for it to envelope you in an experience, such as, you know, being a fish frog.
Yeah.
Hanging out by the lake, especially the way we always talk about evolution and
Yeah.
about climbing through these evolutionary states in order to keep progressing and ascending or whatever.
Yeah, like an important point you made is that yesterday we weren't thinking about clocks and all that. We were sort of getting back to that primordial origin story.
You got it. We were trying it on.
Back to Eden. But, you know, the thing is, we have the material basis to explore nature. Because for animals, nature is just a bloody, violent, dark, barbaric place. For us, well, thanks to you because you invited us out here, we have the material basis. We have the set and setting. We have modern technology. Acid represents modern technology.
Yeah.
We
and
have,
also our survival is taken care of.
Our survival is taken care of. We have all the resources we need: food, water, shelter, medical care. We have all of that. That's the fruits of technology and forward advancement. And since we have all that, we as psychonauts, we have the tools and the capability to access the depths of our, you know, personal unconscious and the collective unconscious, and we can really consciously delve into those dark abysses of animal passion and bestial darkness, and we can harmonize those two elements. We can use scientific consciousness to go into these primordial depths. And that's, I know it's pretty vague, but you see we're getting closer to something there.
Totally. And also, like, community is, like, the other idea.
Exactly.
Like, I
human
think,
community.
Right, you know, because I think that this whole technology taking care of survival and of these primary things that most animals have to get figured out. We've got our shelter, food, water, and everything is chill for us right now. We can get around and go to the grocery store at any time because we all have fucking gas in our cars and we all got jobs, whatever. So my point is that those are all things that have to get taken care of, and most animals they don't store their grain in grain houses. They just fucking go out and catch another mouse. And that makes animals constantly in those lower, not lower, but more primal states of necessity.
Right.
And now humans are at a place like us. We can go out and do psychedelics, and we're put in a place where we can, you know, express that next level of, that next level of, like, consciousness, which is more hedonistic, I guess.
Yeah, hedonism is just a great word to use.
But what's funny is that, like, acid also shows you the blend of both. Like, we went out there in the boats, and, like, we split off between the two groups, and, like, when we had to come back, it was hard to communicate between each other, and on the acid, I just fucking felt like that was just a freak out moment, because it was like, holy shit, all the guys have split, and I'm out here on this fucking boat, I don't have my cell phone, and I'm on acid, and, like, I'm like, okay, this is cool, we're gonna work this out. I mean, I don't know, it wasn't a big thing, but I just remember in that moment how acid can bring you into the, you know, these lower circuits, because they're lower or whatever, more primal. That's what I'm trying to say. More primal. It doesn't make them any less important. And it's easy for people who have been born into middle class society, who are white and who have the easy privilege to sort of just get together the things they need to survive. It's easy for us to gloss over those other circuits and consider them lower and animal. And so that's part of why in our society we've forgotten about those untapped subterranean primal circuits in the human, available to the human nervous system.
You brought up a good point earlier, like talking about how we had our bases covered, and it made me think that if we looked at yesterday and then looked at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I feel like we actually attained all of them and became self-realized for like a few times throughout that trip. We became self-realized.
Yeah, I totally dig that.
Because, like, we had the acceptance of each other, we had the great land, the time, all of our needs taken care of, and there was even the sexual aspect of it, because I don't know if you guys felt this, but I felt almost this erotic, ecstatic bonding with the nature and the surroundings.
Oh,
like,
hell yeah.
Like, as soon as we docked our boats up the first time, we just, we were like, okay, where are we? And we just saw the water, and we just, like, we had shorts and underwear on. We were just like fuck it and like just jumped right in.
Yeah,
it was
swimming in the water was fucking beautiful.
Yeah, and just throwing ourselves in there like
but
that.
I see what you mean.
Like,
it was like a heartfelt, like, you know, like a deep sensual connection to everything.
yeah, like we were like
even
fully exploring the
got
landscape.
And like what I think is like, you know, the bonding experience that can happen on acid is where like you can kind of like bug each other. And, you know, and do a tomboyish sort of splash with the oars. It's like, oh, you motherfucker, and then you're splashing each other and doing that kind of thing. But you know that that's like just connecting each other through this whole experience.
Yeah.
You're becoming more ingrained and giving each other the capacity to go through negative scenarios and still be glued together.
Yeah, and laughter.
At that basic level of like laughter and like trying to keep things easy and smooth.
Yeah, you know, you like quoted something you're quoting to me, and then you're like, you know that? I wrote it, bitch.
Yeah, that was so funny. Yeah, that was so great. I wrote it.
Yeah, that was fucking funny. It was drilling liquor and all that on the acid, which is not really. It's I don't recommend that to anyone.
Yeah, it has its place.
Just I don't officially advocate doing that sort of thing.
Yeah, booze sort of has an.
But it was good. It worked. It worked for me. Yeah. Added that Dionysian sort of.
Dionysus occasionally
elements.
turns into Bacchus.
Yeah, we didn't really know what we were. There wasn't really any goal with this acid trip, but we quickly realized that the goal was to have as fun as possible. So that's when we were like, yeah, like, you know, let's have a couple shots, let's smoke some dubs. Joints at all points.
Yeah, joints at all points. Yeah. And that's what's funny is that, like, you know, like that there's a certain swing to things when it is being buoyed by the passionate open heart, by the passion of the moment, you know? It's different from those old circuits because they're done with a survivalistic, fearful need. And that survivalistic, fearful need can really get you through sometimes.
Yeah.
But there's a certain swing to human energy that involves fun. When you're having fun, it's got power. It's got, you know, like this is part of what I'm talking about with these later circuits or whatever, this like later stage of evolution. After all the underbelly of needs have been taken care of, us as psychonauts can explore like the recreational fun side of things and find out how we can use our energy constructively and to still do that whole work thing and, like, you know, we can be productive. We can make great things together as like artists and creative people in our own rights, especially if we come together and fucking do acid and have fun with it.
And the more work you put into your daily life, the more you get out of those peak experiences.
Absolutely. But
I always like to link it to history. You go back to the old mystery festivals like the one they had outside of Athens. I always forget how you pronounce it. Eleusis, yeah.
Yeah.
They had these psychedelic vision ceremonies, and the purpose was to you know, just shake off the anxieties and stress of everyday life and just, you know, go into that high ecstasy.
Plunge into the abyss of ecstasy.
And pleasure is a big part of that. It's not the goal, but, you know, I think pleasure, like hedonism and pleasure has like a big role to play in terms of that regard.
It's a certain release because, you know, everyone's psychological complex is holding down some kind of tension in order to keep something contained, some bit of energy contained and alive, right? And you go through your whole like existence with certain things wrapped up in a tight circuit, like fucking going to the grocery store, going to your job so you can get money to fucking survive. And when you go to like a festival or when you go to anything that involves that psychedelic experience and you are being given a platform where you can let go of those unreleased psychological tensions for just like a moment, you know, and just fucking just pulverize them with an ecstatic release in that moment.
Yeah, it really helped that not only was my family cool with the use of these psychedelics, but also there's no cops and no other people around like to pass judgments on you, which
Yeah,
would
exactly.
very much so affect the trip.
Yeah.
If we were
Setting is
if
key.
we were talking and like acting like we were like say downtown Belleville,
Right.
like, you know, people would be throwing us out of bars and fucking, you know, like giving us weird looks. We could be arrested, you know, that sort of shit.
You
that
got
like,
it, man.
would have
Yeah,
Yeah,
we had a safe place.
Right.
accepting, very accepting place.
Totally
Yeah,
accepting, yeah. And as psychonauts, we can talk about this crazy ass shit about fucking like aliens and psychedelics and sex and all these usually taboo topics in
Yeah.
this like, you know, secluded little paradise.
Yeah, and I'm usually so timid and, you know, I reluctant to talk about this shit.
Yeah.
But now that we're here in this place and this time, it's like there's no bars, you know. We were just like, we get to totally fully explore that.
Totally. And
Yeah.
to go like, you know, it's just another good part of taking psychedelics with people in like this sort of secure setting is that you can, you know, I mean, we've been rapping like this like we are right now the whole time we were on the acid, and just like exploring the depths of our own curiosity of our own minds,
Yeah.
projecting it to our friends, and then like, you know, like stewing on the data that the three of us like put out to each other.
Yeah.
Now I want to interject with one quick point, not to go too. I don't want to dwell too much time on it, but when we talk about the fact that we have all these resources that allow us to explore the psychedelic realm, that's also a big reason why the vast majority of the sort of the intellectual psychedelic community, people like Terrence McKenna and Timothy Leary, and those writers do have like some value in terms of understanding psychedelia. Like they do have their place in the history of things, but almost all of the major psychedelic thinkers have come from the middle class, and they constantly reflect those values, which I went through like plenty of that. Terrence McKenna says things like, "Oh, the world is made of language," and you know that's a form of idealism. It's just not true. The world is made of matter, and it's you know, the working class. It's people.
Yeah, I think that's a poetic signet that he was trying to get at there.
But it's just not true. The world is made of matter, and these writers, they all have many, many, many different middle class sort of liberal values, and there's a hell of a lot of right-wing people like Sam Harris, really interesting psychonauts. But again, they reflect the values of the intellectual class, and the intellectual class lives in a library. They don't live in
the arteries of real mammal motions.
Right, the point I'm trying to make is that we couldn't have explored the psychedelic realm if someone hadn't actually used their hands and tools to build this cottage. But thinkers like Terrence McKenna, these sort of middle-class psychonauts, and I've read them, like, I don't want to knock them too much, I'm just trying to be objective about it.
Yeah.
But they don't really have that conception of materialism in terms of psychonautics. They have an idealist conception of reality, where reality is woven out of language or ideas or concepts.
Well,
which
consider...
reflects the fact that these thinkers have grown up in universities and campuses and libraries, which have their place. But I think it's always important to try and root the psychedelia into more of a working class sense of things.
I think there's a blend there that you're doing that is like... I agree in the sense that Terrence McKenna and all those boys are middle-class consciousness. I agree with that. Insofar as Terrence McKenna talking about the world being made of language.
And that's not a moral judgment either.
Oh,
So
of
I was
course.
middle class too growing up.
Yeah, I dig.
We all
You
were,
just
right?
mean just...
Nothing
it is,
wrong with that at all.
Yes, but it is a statement of the type of consciousness that's coming out of those psychonauts.
Right, because our consciousness reflects our material class origins.
What I wanted to say is that I think that Terrence McKenna knows that the world is made of matter, you know, like, except that someone like him, his poetry and his language is coming from the place of how the individual can instill his own power in the world of matter. And language is the filter through which we experience our reality, and therefore you can have a much easier time manipulating your reality if you have a close appreciation of the filter of language through which you deal with reality. So I'm sure that he knows that, like, I mean, in Terence's conception, it's all like a hologram, you know? It's all like matter, which is just like these dreamtrons that have been constructed out of the essence of consciousness or whatever, and he perceives them and deals with them from within. But it's just a poetic switch up, man.
Yeah, he called it holographic information.
You got it.
Yeah, that's what he meant by language. That it's code and like if you knew the right binary code, you could paint the picture of a certain landscape. For example, when you type that into a computer, and with that coding, you could essentially create a holographic
pictogram
material.
or whatever, a material.
Yeah.
But my point is that, like, you know, Terence McKenna went down to Peru and fucking, like, hung in the forest for fucking months and did ayahuasca. Like, he knows what the material world is all about. You know, he's not, like, it's not like he doesn't have a conception of matter as being its own individual atomic items. But I think that it is an important point, as we were talking about, that, you know, that these guys do still come from a certain brand of, you know, a state of living, and that's why they are allowed to talk about psychedelics in the way they do.
The main point I wanted to make was that
Good call.
in terms of, you know, forging a sort of new psychedelic literature, we just have to constantly think materialistically and not let in a trace of any sort of theology or idealism or spirituality. We have to begin with a completely materialist conception of nature, of reality, and of humanity and history, which you may not agree with me, but that's definitely what I'm throwing out there.
No, I get you.
Well, what's the risks of having an inkling of theology?
Because then that taints our logic, and logic is, you know, our tool for understanding reality. Logic is based upon finding the evidence and the fact. Theology is premised on personal feeling. What you feel inside is your personal truth. Does that make sense?
So, like, keep your personal truth to yourself is what you're trying to say, or like,
what is personal truth?
Deny the personal truth.
Well, what is personal truth in the first place?
I think we mean personal truth as opposed to facts, like evidential facts.
Yeah.
Can you give me an example of a personal truth versus a fact?
Feeling like you're at the center of the universe, or like feeling like that your trip had a deep meaning and purpose. That sort of stuff. Seeing synchronicities, you know, seeing synchronicity as opposed to a coincidence. You know what I mean? Those sort of things where you like have like meaningful experiences that means a lot to me, but it's not something to communicate to others because, you know, they won't have
get
that
the meaning of the symbol. Yeah. Like if you see a heron on the lake and you think in your head, like, in that moment, like, that's what needed to be seen.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a message from your subconscious.
Yeah, maybe you felt like the spirit of your dead father was in this heron going by, and you felt it. It was like this feeling that you had, you know, but there's no fact to that.
Exactly.
There's no logic to it.
Right, we saw it like going out onto the water and seeing a heron and having this profound ecstatic experience. We're not making any assertions. We see a heron, we have a profound, deep feeling. That is consciousness, that's emotion. We all know that's real, and I'm not disputing that. But to say that, you know, the soul of my dead father is in this heron, which is a classical theological conception, that is a supernatural metaphysic which demands evidence and fact. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's a cute pet belief, but if we are going to have a general thesis of an ideal way of thinking, at least between each other, at least in articulation, it shouldn't involve things which we can't deal with each other through. Like, like a personal experience that goes to that depth of personality in the experience. It can be cute, but what's more important...
A good wholesome moment.
Yeah. I guess my point is that what's most important is that we try to discuss things with a bit more utility as field research, or as, as a constructive, logical argument towards...
Well, I'll give you another example. When I was growing up, I was taught by these priests that demons existed, and that there is a god, and there were these supernatural forces and devils and all sorts of outlandish notions. And they said they couldn't produce any evidence or fact for it. What they said was that you have to believe it. You have to have faith. It doesn't matter what the fact says, because we just know by faith.
Yeah.
And then I got into psychedelics, and I started reading New Ageism and McKenna. And for a year or two, I really believed that the world was like this one conscious entity, like the Gaia sort of thing. I thought that the Earth was Gaia, this immortal god or whatever. And I didn't have any fact for it. What I had was this profound, deep, so-called inner truth, as the New Ageists call it. I had an inner truth. I used mushrooms and I accessed this so-called inner truth, this divine revelation. I just knew it based on faith. And then I realized that, no, my brain was full of shit, that I didn't have any evidence for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I used to believe in...
Especially...
I'm not moralizing at all. I'm just talking about my own experience, because I used to believe in all sorts of different things. But what I ask is that if anyone wants to assert something, then they have to prove it. Just like if I assert something, I have to prove it.
It's, like what's interesting is that sometimes the question of whether you can use logic to assert something which doesn't necessarily have evidence, except by logic.
Yeah.
Which means you can technically logicify anything. It doesn't make it reality. That is true.
Well, not quite. You can't really, for example, make the concept of God logical. It's just, it's...
Well, what I mean is that clever theologians have in the past found ways of looping around it to describe it in a way that someone who's looking for the concept of God can grab onto and say, I knew it. Fuck everybody who says God isn't real. This guy has proven it to me, and that's all I need to hear.
Right, yeah.
I had a train of thought there and I lost it.
Yeah, I think, to move forward in terms of psychedelia, what we have to do is to have those ecstatic trips we had yesterday and get the full effects of the psychedelic trance. But in terms of the literature, we have to purge any trace of spirituality, idealism, theology. We have to treat psychedelia the way that Darwin treated the study of organic bodies, of the origin of species. Because we're looking for the mechanism that explains what psychedelia is. And only hard science and reason is going to be able to get us to that point. And I know very little science so far, but...
Well, reason is a good word. Because through reason, you can work out the logic of anything.
Yeah, I think a really good reason is that you need to keep a grip on the ground. And when you start going with intuitive notions and like then getting swept up in the faith of that, then it's a slippery slope into delusion where, you know, for example, I was talking to Mormons the other day and they're
Right.
like, did you know that you're, you know, taking the form of the body of God and he loves you and like all this shit. Like they have a delusional view of reality that's not embedded in logic. So like when you're buying into the delusion with faith, that's when you can get steered into a whole different view on reality that doesn't actually fit with what was actually proven. And you know, you're gonna, you know, they're gonna get to the other side of the grave and they're not gonna get what they're expecting, you know.
Well, what's their
They were
proof?
holding on to that thing.
What's their
Yeah.
proof for Jehovah? Oh, we can't prove it. We have inner faith. But I could say there's mutant sharks. There's there's demon octopuses in the lake. What's your evidence, Jack? Oh, I don't have any. You have to just believe it in your heart. It's an inner truth.
Oh, like the Loch Ness monster. Like people like
Right.
from Loch Ness, they're like, it is there, it is true. I've been looking every day. I saw it once, and like I swear, yeah. And they cannot. They identify with that belief so much that they cannot be swayed from that.
Yeah.
No one can ever like prove to them that Loch Ness monster doesn't exist because they believe it so hard. And
Yeah.
where I come is like I believe in hypothesis. So, for example, the guy in mind, that feeling of connectingness, it could very well be that the guy in mind does exist, and you can have that hypothesis. But as soon as you believe that as 100% faith and fact, that's when you're in delusion, because you could just be delusional.
Right.
It might not be fact and it has not been proven. So remains hypothesis.
Yeah, one thing I will say is that like I think that it is good to try things on. Like like I'm a guy that wears ridiculous fucking clothes, and a lot of times I find my best clothes by going to a store and finding this crazy looking thing, like this crazy pair of pants, and being like, I don't know if that's gonna work for me, but something tells me that it might. So I'm gonna buy them and wear them for a while, see what the reaction with people is and how I feel about that reaction, and then if it actually turns out to be something I like, then I'll be glad that I tried it on, even though I throw out more pants or ideologies than I actually keep. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I definitely wear them for the day and really see how they fit. You know.
Yeah.
And so that's a part of my point with this. Conception that we have to have everything based purely on evidence. It is important for anybody to be led by the evidence of their own feeling and intuition. I guess I shouldn't put it that way. But it is important for people to be led by their intuition, even when the evidence is not necessarily evident. Because you can have an inkling in your intuition, just feeling the symbols that are involved in an equation that you're working out in your existence, and the meaning and reality of those symbols can transcend what might be a lack of evidence.
Yeah, so you have the hypothesis, and then you go and study it and find out if it's
For
true
yourself.
or not. And if you can't prove it, then it'll just be left as a possibility, unless there's so little evidence that you might as well just couch it.
Right, but again, intuition is like an emotion. It's just it's part of the human condition. It exists. I would never discount that.
Mm-hmm. Looking
Looking at a symbol and having certain emotions or moods arising from looking at it, that that again, that's emotion. Now, if you take a symbol and apply a supernatural metaphysic, like if you say, "Oh, I have this stone it repels bad spirits, or it cleanses your energy and things like that. Now that is a supernatural metaphysic, which needs evidence. That's different than an emotion or a mood. I can have an intuition that I'm hungry, and I don't need to go to the doctor and check all my, go through my body and check physically. I just follow my intuition and I feed myself.
One thing I will say about that is that, like, I do have this sense that, like, certain rocks have, because of the color that they are sort of tuned to the pattern and texture of the rock that makes that color. I'm not saying that is evidence that sort of thing might be a thing, but it's a logical argument that for those who are into that, maybe they could ground themselves in that way. When they're having a shitty time, they use the yellow rock and they ground that sort of vitalizing consciousness.
Well, having a totemic sort of emotional connection to an object or to a stone, again, that's human emotion. It's perfectly valid.
It's an emotional tool.
It's not an assertion that demands evidence. If I walk to a New Age store, on the other hand, they literally sell these stones and they say that this one, it does this.
Point.
This one, like, crystals have energies and
It requires
healing powers. Now, what's your evidence for that? Oh, well, you need it's an inner truth.
Yeah.
I see your point. Like, the fact that they'll hustle it. Just
right. And, the psychedelic, a real psychedelic philosophy, it will never be taken seriously until we can purge all of this spiritualism and idealism and theology. At least that's my argument that I'm making.
Either that, or we could ground the recreational capacity for psychedelics and consider it as, well, I'm inclined to call it a religious concept, like we were talking about that whole Timothy Leary bit last night. Like, it could be like a perfect stand-in for the religious circuit, or the circuit, like that hedonic circuit I was talking about, where all the lower things are figured out, and so now we have the time and energy to indulge in these psychedelics and work out these connections that can be so yielding.
But all of that really has nothing to do with religion. Psychedelia, the psychedelic, here's the thing, the psychedelic experience,
I think it's what religion's supposed to be. Sorry.
Well, I think we have a different conception. The psychedelic experience has, from its inception, been bound up with religion. It's been expressed through religion. Religion has appropriated it. But these are really two different topics. You have religion, and you have the psychedelic experience. Now, our task is to extract the psychedelic experience from the religion. And by religion, I mean, what is religion? The core elements of religion are supernatural metaphysics, the assertion of supernatural forces and gods, and any sort of supernatural assertion that's premised not on objective fact, but on inner faith or on the voice of God or what have you. That's one of the core elements of religion. I mean, that's, religion to me has nothing to do with what we did yesterday.
Yeah.
That was not a religious
That was a religious experience for me.
Well, you interpret it religiously.
You got it. I think we have a different definition of religion. That's the problem.
Yeah, what's your definition?
My definition of religion is a organized use of recreational energy.
Well, I don't think that's a precise way to use the word religion.
Might not be the way history has defined it, because, for example, the Catholic whole shtick is to use that extra recreational energy in ceremonial mass or whatever for the sake of this whole fucking weird Vatican thing. But essentially, that's just like a ideology or a dogma or a belief system under which to organize this extra energy from us living and using it in a way where it's like, okay, well, duh, we've got this energy, we've got genitals, so we must have to make a family, and we must have to go to a church, and we must have to have a market and a quiet, domesticated anthill society. That's what our whole dogma has tried to cultivate and control this hedonic energy through. And that's religious. That's where we putting this energy. Oh, well, it must be for God, so let's let it be contained through the form which we call Catholic God dogma. But that experience of where that energy could go or be directed towards in a spirited way, or in a, that extra hedonic energy after, again, all the lower circuits have been figured out, that can be put towards something that is, like, in every moment when we do acid, like every now and then you just want to have like a beer and just like chill out and sort of wax out a little bit. But there are those who during a psychedelic experience, I don't know, we all do our own little ways of like meditating, but meditating is a good example of a constructive way to just simply breathe and exist and not have to do anything but breathe and exist in that moment, not have to turn on the radio, not have to do anything. It's a way to channel that extra energy in a way that doesn't cause like a need, a desirous thing on the outside, which is also good, but it's a balancing mechanism. And so my whole point is that psychedelics ought to be the religion of the future. And I think that this whole thesis that religiosity on the whole is simply a concoction by the Vatican to hold power over people, or any state where supernatural beliefs are pushed on people in order to repress the deeper truth of the elitism of that higher power. That is a historical case that has happened and is true in many regards, but that doesn't necessarily have to quash the definition of religion as being that simply that state repression.
I'd like to say something on that. Like a good example of religion appropriating psychedelics is Salvia divinorum, because in Mexico, where it was discovered, they call it Scama di Pastora, which is the leaves of Mary the Shepherdess, Mary being the Virgin Mary from the Bible, and they like put that onto this psychedelic drug. And the thing is that if you take that drug or experience it, there is no reference to the Bible in the experience. It is totally, there are no biblical references. Nothing in the Bible alludes to Salvia divinorum. So that's just like people chunking things together and like, oh, this is like a profound experience, so therefore it must be religious. And I also think another thought I had was that we should probably try to like expand our language, because words like religion and God have a lot of notions tacked onto it. For example, if you said, I believe in God, most people would think, oh, you believe in this giant white bearded guy in the clouds. But you can have different notions of what religion and God are, like that are totally different than what most people's are. But you use those words and people get an image in their head, like when you're describing religion, that seems like a different definition than what most people would have of religion. Yeah, I think that you're right. I do agree with that. Maybe I should find a different word for what I'm trying to say.
Well, here's the thing. If you look at history, you can take the rites of, what is it again? Eleusis.
Yeah.
Eleusis. Or you take, the pagan faiths, or the Gnostics, and there you have psychonautics interpreted through religious metaphysics.
Right.
Because the Gnostics would take psychedelics and
through the attitude of sacred.
And they would talk about Jesus and coming into God consciousness and what have you. That is, or in the chapter An Experience in Cosmic Consciousness in the Autobiography of a Yogi, which is a completely religious book filled with irrationality, but in the chapter where he has his psychedelic vision, he in the writing he describes a full-blown DMT trip, and he describes it utilizing religious metaphysics. But religion is the cancerous part of the equation. Religion is the irrational part. Religion is, the Vatican is religion in its most classical form. It began with, first of all, as a part of its history, not the main part, but as a secondary part of the Vatican's history, it did violently repress the Gnostics. It banned peyote in Mexico City. It burned witches.
Right.
So that religion has actually always been premised. It includes within itself the suppression of psychedelia, just like religion includes the sexual repression of women, and all sorts of other nasty garbage.
To me, that doesn't come from the religion. That comes from the people who are perpetuating it.
Yeah, people kind of inflict themselves onto God. Like, for example, they'll have a bad reaction to, like, homosexuality, and so they're like, oh, no, God hates fags. Have you ever seen that sign, that guy, like, pulling that up? Yeah, but that's why God was a white male for so long, is because that was the ideal infliction of what they would think is the ultimate, the ultimate thing.
I guess that's a big part of my point, is that, the Christian mythos that God is this asshat in the clouds who, when you look at the Dark Ages and the Christians just roved about fucking raping and pillaging and doing all the shit in the name of God. It's in their name of God.
Their version of God, yeah.
Not in the conception of energy itself, which is all what God is. So, and when you consider any religion, the Christians have, they're gay bashers, and the Hindu religions usually have a male patriarchal dominance implied, where the men in the society are the more dominant ones, and that comes through in their religion. But religious epithet is connected to the cultural epithet. But the conception of religion itself, which is the channeling of energy, is not necessarily these cultural values come from the culture and not from the idea of religion itself.
But that's just, I know,
we gotta get the
exactly
definition.
what you're trying to say, but I've been writing these theses on religion and psychonautics to really try, and you guys should definitely read it, because I really am trying to dissect what religion is.
It's a semantics issue.
Now, everything that you're into, whether it's hatha yoga, tantric sexuality, psychedelia, hedonism, structuring acid trips to
those
get the
are
acid
religious
flowing.
to me.
But that's not that's not really a precise way to use the term religion, because billions of people.
It's ceremonial.
Ceremonial is a different word. You can have a psychedelic ceremony. That's a good word.
Right. And just like they did in Eleusis.
All right.
They treated it sacredly.
With Eleusis, that was a psychedelic ceremony.
You got it.
But you also had the elements of religion, which was that's what needs to be extracted. Does that make sense?
That's an interesting point.
Yeah, Salvia Divinorum is actually a great example of that, because there are, if you took Salvia, for example, you hear this voice, the female voice, which happens a lot.
Yeah.
And then you come down, they're like, oh, this must be Mary, what I've heard in the Bible, because that's our brain trying to fill in the gaps. And we'll try to, find a quick fix for an answer, because we need to have our thirst quenched. We need to have some answers
to this
but
thing.
If you were to truly approach it rationally, you would say, I don't know what this voice was or who this was or whatever. It's people's need to fill in the gaps that they'll take something biblical and attach it to the psychedelic,
Right.
To in order to try to make sense and explain it, when really we do not have a sufficient explanation for it yet.
Bingo. People latch on to the cultural tropes that are available, and there's nothing wrong with mythology. There's nothing wrong with the story of Arjuna in the Gita in a metaphorical sense.
Good stories.
It's mythology, but in the Gita, there's another example of how psychedelia and religion intersect. The psychedelic part is
Chapter 9.
the right where there's the description of the actual acid trip. The acid trip is a neutral phenomenon, and there's also some different sort of philosophy in there, which is really cool. And then the religious aspect is where
You give it up to Krishna.
the supernatural metaphysics, and also the social garbage, because for you religion means this hedonistic psychedelic thing.
You got it.
But religion, for billions of people, it means Christianity, Hinduism, Buddhism,
Yeah, that's
Jainism,
what I was getting at. Yeah.
Islam,
The word's too tainted.
and all religions sort of carry through anti-women bigotry. They carry through homophobia. They carry through sexual repression. They carry through the repression of the psychedelic instinct. All religions are premised upon upholding slavery, on crushing people.
You know
And it
what,
goes
Jack?
deeper and deeper and deeper
If you
and
don't
deeper.
mind me saying so, what I would think is that it's true that all religions in the world will have these negative points. But would you say that there are some religions which have some negative points, but not others, while other religions have their own negative points, but are missing the ones of the one? Not every religion has these standalone negative points. It's just different bad ones in different ways.
From my conception, all religions sort of have the same basic structure. All religions have those roots. I don't know exactly.
I would say atheism is religious in
Oh,
the
no,
sense.
no.
Because atheism is a... Yeah, we have to find a definition for religion.
Well,
because-
atheism is definitely not a religion.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. I guess, it would be a religious... I'm thinking whether it would be a religious leaning or not. Because atheism just basically means, in my conception of religion, that the person does not have any transpersonal conception of their own energy. No, hold on. I've got to think about what I'm trying to say here. Because to me, that the God that all religious items are trying to unveil or realize is a sense of transpersonal energy economy, where everybody is seen as blessed into one, and our interactivity in a heart and impassioned way will actually catalyze our energy input to output ratio, which will make our lives easier. That to me is what religion is. But
the truth is the complete opposite, because all religions historically have always been premised upon class oppression, whether that's the Vatican, whether that's Iran and Saudi Arabia.
Right, but again, that comes from the culture
whether
that it birthed into.
The Buddhists in Rohingya who have been the Buddhists in Myanmar who have been slaughtering the Muslims. Religion has always been deeply rooted in slavery. It's always been about controlling and befuddling.
Well, what I will say is that
masses.
these conceptions of religion have persisted in times before science became available. Now that science is available and quantum physics is available, and we can conceive of the galaxy as just one galaxy in an ocean of multiple universes of galaxies, we can conceive of the human conception of energy as just one battery on the whole multiverse of batteries, and that what we tried to do as humans living on the planet is to try to organize our extra energy in a way that cultivates an easier way of living and way of being. And so, with that scientific premise being established in today's time, we can take the culture and the understandings that the internet and the world becoming more and more enlightened or whatever, we can take these new understandings and rationales and reasonings and craft a new religiosity where our hedonistic energy is put towards a more a better script for our hedonic energy, or a better playground, a better platform for our energy.
Religion is just one of the great cancers of human history.
It's like
it has so much blood and death on it.
It's like festival consciousness, man. Like ceremony, like holidays.
Well, that's different than religion. That's completely different than religion.
I guess so. I mean, pagan holidays, for example. Let's consider a pagan holiday like Christmas, you know? It happens because of nature, you know? Because the sun has gone down on its zenith and it's going to be rising again in the next 3 days. And it's just a universal cultural metaphor for coming in and taking store of where you are with your family and having that sort of holiday ecstatic experience. And it happens once a year at the same time.
That's perfectly cool. That's,
right. Now the pagans would translate that as just like a respect and grace for like heart energy, I guess, or enjoyment of each other.
Yeah, we can have as much mythology and ceremony and poetry, and,
you got it.
as we can,
and you wouldn't
we want.
You wouldn't call that like religiosity.
Oh no! If
or
we
culture.
Want to have, we talk about having a Dionysian ecstatic experience. That's an amazing sort of mythos, a symbol, a metaphor that has just so much depth and meaning.
Mm-hmm.
But we are not literally worshiping Dionysus. We're not literally worshiping a god.
Yeah,
that is supernatural and metaphysic.
Yeah, I would describe religion as a virtual reality where you fill in the gaps, and it's like pretending, but like you actually believe it, and it's you fill the gaps in with whatever notion, and then you have that view, and you see all of life that way. But then what you just described with paganism, I wouldn't describe that as religious either, although certainly has religious aspects. But to say that's religious, I think would actually like taint the meaning of the word religion, because pagans were just kind of like, hey, this is happening, let's celebrate, let's have fun.
Yeah.
But then when the Christians came along, hey, no, this is actually Jesus' birthday, even though there was no proof that Jesus was born that day.
Right, that's how they, yeah.
Like, and then that's when you get into the virtual reality. Everyone believes that this is Jesus' birthday, December 25th.
You got it.
No evidence whatsoever.
There's no evidence for Santa Claus either.
Yeah. See, that's me.
I have interfaith that there's an Easter bunny.
I would call that pseudo-religious, in the same way that anybody could call like a pseudoscience, you know, that is pseudo-religious.
I think science is pseudo-religion. Because religion is pseudoscience.
Yeah.
Religion, yeah.
Go ahead, please.
Well, sure. My point is that, like, you know, I think that the taint that has gone on is on our conception of the word religion. And if we had a goddamn dictionary, this would just all be figured out right now. Because I want to look up, like, I think it comes from religios. It's probably a Greek word.
We can definitely look that up.
I have found a lot of times that I've been unsatisfied with definitions for words. For example, divine. I think there is a divinity, like that is truth, but the definition for divinity has it has a bad description of it. I feel like it can evolve. Like,
I always
these
thought it
words.
was etymologically connected to like vines, like actual plants creeping up from the gene code.
Yeah.
You know, divine, and perhaps also has to do with division, in the sense that it's coming
Like
from
fractal then.
yeah, kinda. It's coming
Vine,
from a
then
state of
divided.
division
Yeah.
and going back to the vines of unity from whence the division came. Divine, back to your state of holism. Just looking up religion here. Show me potato salad. Getting anything meaty?
Well, on online etymology dictionary, state of life bound by monastic vows. Also, conduct indicating a belief in a divine power. Old French, religion, piety, devotion, religious community. And directly from Latin, religionem. Respect for what is sacred, reverence for the gods, conscientiousness, sense of right, moral obligation, fear of the gods, divine service, a religious observance, a religion, a faith, a mode of worship, cult, sanctity, holiness. There's a lot
Those are
here.
synonyms and stuff, but I heard
That's almost meaningless, right?
Exactly.
Because there's so many things that are religious, but does not fit that description.
well, yeah, but I think that
Reverence
there's
for the gods. What the hell is this?
to
these
me, those are metaphors. Like, I think the main name of the game that is expressed in the word religion is piety. And the idea of fully giving yourself to whatever is going on or whatever it is that you're doing, and including in life. I always say that the big name of the game of life, so far as I understand it, is that pain and pleasure alike are the experiences which the genetic intelligence seeks. Because the more that you fully open yourself to the pains of life, as well as fully opening yourself to the bliss of life, and involve your energy in it in a heartfelt way, the more you'll learn the experience of what your genetic material is, what makes you happy, and how you can best use that heartfelt, passionate energy in your life. And so that's why I think that this piety is the whole meaning and notion of religion, is a way of activating a feeling like every moment in your life is part of the ecstatic, glorious continuum of everything. I mean, I don't know. You gotta be mundane sometimes, of course. You gotta get life be dreary.
Ground yourself.
But these are not metaphors at all. Maybe for you, you understand it
You got it.
as poetry. But for millions, for billions of people, for, the great majority of humanity, these are not symbols. They're supernatural metaphysics. They actually believe in supernatural gods and demons and such things, which is why religion is a relic of our prehistory. It came around to fill in the gaps of our understanding, but it's completely rooted, first of all, in supernatural metaphysics. And it has nothing to do with metaphors.
I think it's just rooted in neurological energy. It's rooted in the capacity for humans to put their energy towards something.
But again, that can
Ultimately,
be...
I see your... Sorry, I see your...
It's
I didn't
okay.
want to interrupt you, because I see your point that whether or not, my conception of religion is irrelevant to the fact that it is ultimately fucking around with a lot of people, because its conceptions can lead one to believe people don't see the meaning behind the symbol and the metaphor or the mythos of any religious conception, and so it can cause more delusion than clarity. That's like the main point we're getting at here.
I don't want, at least for me, I want the psychedelic philosophy to not be tainted by, by religion. And religion, since the dawn of religion almost, religion has been stained with the blood of countless millions of people. Religion is responsible for just, oceans of blood and the burning of witches and all, just
Yeah.
it's just a complete history of human horror. And at least for me, I want to make sure that psychedelia has nothing to do with this whole tradition of blood and gore. Not to mention the more basic fact that we're looking for the mechanism that explains psychedelia, and it is just impossible to get to that point so long as we have any trace of theological false consciousness.
Yeah.
Darwinism showed that the supernatural has absolutely no place in the origin of species. There's a rational, materialist explanation for the plethora of living species we see all over the world. And understanding this, having this enlightened consciousness about nature through Darwinism, through rationalism, that is more, that is just a divine gift. Well, not poetically speaking.
Yeah.
It's, I could use a better term than that.
Yeah. Hey.
Yeah, like getting back
anyway.
getting back to the trip we had yesterday.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good example.
Good idea to get back, yeah.
There's a big difference between what we were talking about, how we felt like we were accessing our primordial memory. Like we felt like fish frogs or whatever. Mm-hmm. There's a difference between that and feeling like Jesus Christ was there with me, because that Jesus Christ was just a notion that, like, from a story, the filling in of gaps and delusions. But then the primordial aspect of it could be delusory or illusory, but there is evidence that it is possible too.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that last point?
It's possible that when we're fish frogging, when we were accessing what we felt like was our primordial instincts or memories, it could be that was just illusory and that we were just feeling that. But there are facts that we can make that connection. There are evidence that alludes to that through our DNA coding, because in our DNA code, there's all the coding for all life. You just flip some zeros and ones around, and then that's the difference between a mushroom and a human.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is possible that we were actually accessing primordial memories. But at the same time, we have to accept that it could have just been a feeling.
Right, that's absolutely true. When you talk about how it feels like we're accessing genetic memory, that too demands proof, because that's an assertion, but it's not a supernatural assertion.
Right.
It makes sense. It's very likely and very probable.
It's a logical intuition that's based on a platform of facts that we all agree with, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, based on what we know about DNA, based on the hyper connectivity of brain scans that they did with people on LSD. And then based on the feeling that we had. And now that we're recording this and we put it out there, scientists can take this trip into their database, and who knows, they actually might find that with LSD and other psychedelics you can access primordial memories through RNA or some other shit.
Well said. Yeah.
But until that is proven, it could just be a feeling.
Well said. Right, what we're doing now, and sorry if I was getting too heated up there. I get angry when I think about priests and things like that.
Good. Fuck your god. I think it was good. That was a great conversation.